There are many challenging things about working in watercolor. In fact, I often thought that if Van Gogh had painted in watercolor, he might have killed himself sooner. But on the other hand, it's also a joy and exciting because you never know what the effects are going to be, and you get really happy surprises sometimes. But then there is the challenge of what to do with a watercolor that didn't work out. I have got a great thing, which I can do when I have watercolors that don't turn out. I don't have to throw them in the trash. I give them to my talented husband, who turns them into hats. So we have these party hats, which he has made for me and other friends, and this is the Mad Hatter's Tea Party. So let's see. Probably messing up my hair, but anyway, you can see it from all sides, and it's every one of these is a watercolor that was not good enough to be framed. So this gives me a certain freedom when I'm working. I don't have to get all tight and worried. I know that Doug will put them to good use. Well, this is my workstation, and this ratty looking thing here is actually a Gator foam core board, which is especially made for watercolor so that you can wet your paper and put it right down, and it makes a seal. So this is flat, otherwise you have to tape it, and in this case, since I work really wet, this keeps it flat, otherwise it tends to buckle. Okay. Now this should lie perfectly flat, being on this Gator foam board, and it's quite wet. And but it's been out of the tub of water for a little while drying, so I think we will start with something. Now sometimes I just start and get into a zone and do it, but other times I use a photograph of some sort, so I will show you. I have a couple of things here of rocks. I sort of like using black and white because it doesn't affect my color choice, and since I'm not trying to do realism, I sort of enjoy that. I use this to see what the colors look like. Also, when I need to clean the brush off, it's nice to have that. As well as I use two things of water. One is for dirty water, and one is for cleaner water, so that I can keep one clean and so the pigments will remain pure. Of course, sometimes I get so involved in the painting that I forget and I put it in the wrong one. So I'm going to start with a, let's see, a very pale yellow. This is New Gamboge, and this is my golden ochre. Golden ochre is quite a different color from regular ochre. It's more transparent and it's more vibrant, and I like using it. For about 35 years I've been doing plein air painting, plein air simply being French for out of doors, and in watercolor. And this is an example of the kind of rock and sea studies that I was doing. This is down at Pfeiffer Beach in Big Sur. And while of course this is very controlled, you can see I used a pencil line and very carefully planned it all out. But some of the color combinations are still things that I am using on some of my wilder, freer artwork, such as this, which has a sense of rock about it, heightened color, but still using a lot of this similar pigment, just in different sort of a different proportion. I painted this painting entitled Cool Coming in my studio, and I had no plan for the composition when I began. Except for the deep blue, though, the colors are somewhat similar to those that I used in the Big Sur watercolor. However, this painting is a spontaneous effort to capture the gesture of rock and wave. Working on wet paper, I applied a lot of pigment and water and was rewarded with interesting effects which are unique to the medium of watercolor. For many years, I've made trips to Lake Tahoe and painted in the High Sierras. I've been very interested in the water patterns that I found in the waterfalls and also in the rocks surrounded by snow, because they're very similar patterns to the ones that I've observed watching the surf crash over the rocks in Monterey Bay. In my painting Rising and Falling, I allowed the paint to rise and bleed. Where is rock and where is water? Where is air? They become one. In dialogue between rock and wave, I'm attempting to find essential rhythms. The wave patterns are formed by the rocks that offer resistance, and at the same time, the rocks are sculpted by the force of the waves breaking over them. By letting the watercolor bleed, I'm expressing the connection not only between rock and wave, but also trying to find my own place in this mysterious world. As poet Robinson Jeffers wrote, "The tides are in our veins. We still mirror the stars." Here I'm playing with color. It's fun to intensify the tones. I had fun using colors that you normally don't get to use in painting the sea. I suffer from insomnia, and I've turned it into a plus by painting early in the morning. I like to watch the day break from my studio window. There's a brief window there between night and day where it's easier to see the essence of things because much of the early morning world is in silhouette. Morning Mindscape was done almost in the dark, painted directly and intuitively. Unfortunately, I can't remember how I painted it. When you get into the zone, paintings seem to paint themselves. Once I get into the painting, I'm really, the shapes are playing off against each other more, and I sort of get away from whatever originally inspired me to get started. One tone likes another tone, and so you work with that. Actually, Degas said, find a tone that you love, begin with that, and then lie about the rest. Of course, he was doing things from life, but I think that's really good advice. I'm really enjoying this a lot, so I'm trying to go with tones that are going to augment area in, let's see, I have the angle of the board is tilted just slightly, so I get some bleeds going down. If I get to a point such as here, where I probably would prefer it not to run any further down, I can prop it up like something. It's one thing that the painting will continue to sort of paint itself after I stop because of the wetness. I gotta stop it just a little bit there. But I like having, you know, these little bleeds, because water and land, especially with the sea coming in and out, they do meet, they do merge. Sometimes you aren't sure. Such as in this picture, you're not always sure exactly where is sand. There's wet sand, there's sky reflected in sand, there's water in the sand. So it's all, there's a unity to it, which with watercolor you can kind of let it merge in, which I like to do. The other tricky thing in watercolor, there are many, is knowing when to stop. You don't want to go too far, get it overworked, get it muddy, but of course you want to have it finished. So that is that's always a little tricky. Well, I think I'm going to stop with this and see what happens when it dries. As I said, it continues to paint itself after I stop because of the running and the merging of the watercolor, so that's another little surprise that happens. Well, I'm going to be working a little more on the painting that we let dry. After it dried, I decided it was probably more of a hat than a painting. The watercolor tends to dry light anyway, which I know and compensate for, but when it's really wet and it bleeds together, sometimes it works just great and other times it mushed together. So in this case, some really cool things were going on down here and it mushed together. So I went back in after it had dried And I put more of the Prussian blue in through here. And then I also put some subtle washes over the rocks to make them a little more vibrant. They were looking a little bit boring. So I am going to attempt to put to go back in and see what I can do. And it's always a little, you're never sure. It's a little tricky, but I'm going to protect this this part. So I like the way that looks. So I'm going to put a little spray on here, wet it down a little bit, and then take a brush and kind of, we'll sort of see what happens. Need that now. Now I'm going to go back in with the Prussian blue, a fairly heavy amount of pigment, because when it's wet, the wetter it is, the more pigment you need for it to sort of maintain itself. I'm putting it a little lower than where I want it to be, because it's going to bleed, and even though we're on an angle, it will bleed uphill. I'm kind of echoing sort of a diagonal, sort of to go along with some of the other diagonals. Now this, I think we still don't, I'm going to knock this down a bit too. This is just a dry brush that I'm using to kind of blend it so that it doesn't look added on. You want everything to look like it was done at the same time. We won't know precisely what happens until it dries. The other kind of thing that I do sometimes is take a dry brush, and in this case I don't want these little drops of water to show, so I just hold it here and let them, they just travel up the brush, because we want to keep the yellow ochre tone there. Let's see, what else got sprayed? Yeah, I don't want a line right here, so we'll just kind of soften that. Now this will run together a bit, so I think I'm going to let that be. But now I think it's a painting and not a hat, so that's always good for me. Not so good for my husband, who likes to have more hat material, but